So a lot of students swear by flashcards, and we were no exception. We even started a flashcard app. But being so deep in this craze revealed to me how terrible my flashcards actually were. Yes, it's a great way to study, but it's not easy to do well, and flashcards can actually be detrimental to our grades if done incorrectly. So in today's video, which is part of our study skills series, I'll be sharing our ultimate flashcard tutorial. It consists of 3 parts, and it's important to learn them in order, so don't skip ahead. Part 1 is to understand the role of flashcards and how they fit into the overall study system. Flashcards help us rote memorize standalone pieces of information or isolated facts. What they don't do is help us understand concepts or piece them together to see the big picture. So there's this paradox with flashcards. The more we make, the more time we have to spend reviewing them, and the less time we have to spend towards actually understanding and learning the main concepts. So it's important to know if and when to make flashcards. So before I'm tempted to make flashcard, I ask myself 2 questions. Have I tried to group the information together? In pharmacology, we have to know all these drugs, and instead of making 20 flashcards for 20 different medications, we want to take some time to group them first. Are there any underlying relationships between these drugs? For example, these meds here all end in the same suffix, sartan, because they help with blood pressure in a particular way. So what I would do is group them all by name and just make one flashcard for all of them. Or all these drugs are safe for pregnant patients. Or these work really fast and are used for emergencies. So taking time to understand relationships allows me to make far fewer flashcards that are actually more memorable. And the second question, is this piece of information important enough to memorize? Not all information is created equal. Most exams follow the 80-20 rule, meaning 80% of the exam comes from only 20% of the material, and that 20% is usually the main concepts, and that's where we want our attention to be. The rest of the material are details, and yes, some details are more important than others, and there are always going to be facts that are so obscure and so isolated from the rest of the material that you literally just have to rote memorize. Things like random dates or abstract names like medications, enzymes, rare diseases, equations, or anything your teacher says will be on the test. The list goes on. So this is why we recommend making your own flashcards as opposed to using pre-made decks from someone else. That way you're forced to understand the material and draw your own conclusions before you blindly commit everything to memory. All right, now we're on to part 2. This is making your flashcards. So creating quality flashcards takes a lot of practice, and you have to be very intentional with every card, or else you'll waste a lot of time. So we'll start with some terrible flashcards and level them up using our framework here. Point number 1 is to make flashcards as simple and specific as possible. And this is usually achievable with only one topic per card. It should be black and white, right? It should be super clear what the card is asking for. If it's not, then you haven't broken down the concept deeply enough. For example, our terrible flashcard reads, what does blood do? This flashcard is super vague, right? It raises a lot of additional clarifying questions, like which specific component of blood? Plasma, white blood cell, red blood cell? Where in the body? The lungs, the heart, the vessels? We know it's a bad flashcard when the answer is a long list, because when you study lists, you might recall some, but not all the facts. And this causes us to incorrectly gauge what we know and what we don't know. So to make this flashcard better, let's add a few clarifying words, like what is the role of red blood cells at the peripheral tissue? Okay, this is much more specific. At the peripheral tissue, red blood cells deliver oxygen in exchange for carbon dioxide. So these one-to-one cards force us to understand concepts at the fundamental level and leaves no question whether or not we know the facts. Tip number 2 is to include answer context. So on the back of my flashcards, I like to include extra details or references or context that help me understand the bigger picture. So in our example, I can improve the card by referencing a page in the lecture slide or in the textbook, or I could put a diagram or image or a comparison table differentiating between the 3. I could even link a YouTube video. But there's a twofold benefit here. First is that I have a reference to help me refresh my knowledge if I need it, but more importantly, I'm actively trying to relate this card to all the other concepts and forcing myself to always think of the big picture. And point number 3 is to add memory techniques. Using flashcards to remember memory techniques is next level. It's like Inception. You're memorizing how you memorized. We have a whole video about memorization techniques that I can link here or in the description. But basically, if you have a mnemonic or an image, acronym, mind palace, a story, or any other creative way to trigger your memory, it should be put on the flashcards. Again, check out that memory techniques video where we go into much more detail. And point number 4, make digital flashcards. And as someone who started a flashcard app, This should go without saying, but you want to have mobile access as well. Because digital flashcards allow us to quickly search for any card we need. We can organize our cards by folders and tags. We can make custom decks, like for a midterm, or we can combine multiple decks for a final exam. We can study anytime, anywhere from the convenience of our phones. And most importantly, digital flashcards can use spaced repetition. This is basically a built-in algorithm that schedules your review for you based on how well you know your flashcards, which helps in overall retention. But not every flashcard app has spaced repetition capabilities, so be sure to check. I'm not really going to recommend any specific apps, but I do suggest you try out multiple and then you pick the one that you enjoy using the most, not the one with the fanciest features, as you'll see why in the next section. Part 3 is studying our flashcards. Our tools are only as powerful as the way we use them, so let's talk about the key ingredients to get the most out of studying our flashcards. I like to schedule in time to practice every day, and it doesn't even have to be that long, maybe like 5 to 10 minutes, just to start building the habit. Some common questions that we've gotten are, how am I supposed to finish all my flashcards in 5 minutes a day? Or how many cards should I do every day? And the answer is, it doesn't matter, as long as you're consistent. Remember that flashcards are just a rote memorization tool, right? They're not really a substitute for learning the information. If you find yourself spending more time practicing flashcards than understanding main concepts, like using mind maps or past papers or something, then you're practicing too many flashcards. So that's why I recommend pairing our flashcard studying with a routine that we already do on a daily basis. For example, always doing your flashcards when you're brushing your teeth. Here is a list of other examples. Also consider practicing flashcards in all the random pockets of time throughout the day, like waiting in line or riding past your princess with your bro. Here's another list of examples. Also consider pairing it with something you enjoy or rewarding yourself, like only allowing yourself to drink boba while you're doing flashcards at the same time. Here's a list of other examples that you can reward yourself with after doing your flashcards. Our biggest goal is to try to reduce the total number of cards in our deck whenever possible, because we don't want it to get to critical mass, at which point you're making more flashcards than you are learning from them. I'd recommend using the rule of 3. If you've gotten a flashcard correct 3 times in a row, you're probably not going to forget it, so just archive it. If you get a flashcard wrong 3 times in a row, then it's probably time to rethink that card. Maybe it's too vague, it needs to be rewritten, or maybe it needs to be further broken down into multiple cards. Or maybe you need to add a memory technique to that card. Speaking of which, memory techniques really help me level up my flashcard game. If you haven't seen our ultimate memorization guide, I recommend you check it out. Plus, at the end of that video, we share a cool trick on how to condense information to further reduce the amount of flashcards that you need to make. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you in that video.